2 weeks ago, I preached the first of 3 messages on sex within our Whole Us series. And the aim of that message was to help us to understand God's idea of sex. It was to build a theology of sex for us. And we recognized that rules can be bent and rules can be broken and rules are external. But God's law is eternal and it is internal, and that is what we need to guide us in our ideas about sex. So under theology of sex, there were 3 main things. The first one, sex is good and it's God's idea. He invented it. The second thing is that sex is holy. It is not ordinary, and that means it's not to be tossed around. It's not to be used and abused. It's sacred and it needs special treatment. And the third thing is that sex is powerful. It is so powerful because it is not just the coming together of 2 bodies, but it is actually the imprinting of one personality on another personality to the depth of their soul and their spirit. Sex is powerful. We also learned 3 distinctive words for love that are found in the book of Song of Songs. And the first one is Ra-yor. And Ra-yor is that soulmate, best friend kind of love. And it's about a close friendship. So that's Ra-yor. Everyone say Ra-yor. The second word was ahava. Let's say it together. Ahava. Ahava is that yearning for one another, desperate to see one another and to be together, can't stand to be without each other. And it's the sort of love that makes a long-term commitment. Okay? A long-term commitment to be together. Ahava. The third word doesn't sound as nice, but it's got a great meaning, and it is dode. Everyone say dode. Dode, all right, dode is the powerful sexual element of love where the 2 personalities are imprinted to the depth of their souls and their spirits together. Ra-yor, used 9 times in Song of Songs. Ahava, make a commitment type of love, can't do without you type of love. And then it moves on to dode, which is the physical union. And it's a union that anchors our soul and our spirit to another person. Well, God's safe sex plan, in a time when we're talking about safe sex, was to start with Ra-yor, move on to Ahava, make the commitment, the long-term commitment of marriage to one another, and then to enjoy all the benefits of dode together. And we learnt that sexual sin doesn't just require forgiveness, because the forgiveness element seems, we can just ask God for forgiveness and he gives us forgiveness. But where there has been wounding because of our sexuality, where shame has come upon us in our sexuality, it's not just forgiveness, it's healing. We need the healing that comes from God. That redeemed song. We're going to sing that one. I'll just warn the worship team at the end. We're going to go there at the end with that song because we need the healing hand of God. And next week, Jazz is going to do the 3rd in the series, and it's going to be on redeeming your sexuality. It's about having the new start. So if you want to get all 3, this last week's is on podcast. I think Pastor John sent it around via email as well. It's on YouTube. Anyone can listen to it. All right. Well, I thought it was fair last week. We started with some words of Song of Song because, this is the book on sex in the Bible, although sex is throughout the whole Bible. But we read words that describe the male. I just want to read some words that describe the female. So this is going to help boys. Listen carefully, because this is going to help you know how to compliment your wife. And for guys not married yet, this is going to help you know what to look for. All right, here we go. How beautiful you are, my darling. Oh, how beautiful. Your eyes behind your veil are doves. Your hair is like a flock of goats descending from the hills of Gilead. Oh, and your teeth. Your teeth are like a flock of sheep just shorn, coming up from the washing. Each one has its twin. Not one of them is alone. And your lips are like a scarlet ribbon, and your mouth is lovely. And then it goes on down, and your breasts are like two fawns, like twin fawns of a gazelle that browse among the lilies. Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, oh, I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense. You are altogether beautiful, my darling. And here's the clincher. There is no flaw in you. Now, John. I don't think you've actually ever said that there was no flaw in me. Just saying. Well, because sex is powerful and because sex is holy and because sex is God's idea, we're wired, we are created for this intimacy. And we need to learn how to handle, how to manage, or I'm going to use the word steward, our sexuality. So the stewards here know what this means. You've already got a head start, stewards. Wave hands, stewards. Thank you. How to steward our sexuality, how to handle it, how to manage it. That's what we're talking about today. You know, 3 times in the book of Song of Songs, the young virgin who's newly married, she says this, daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. 3 times she tells her girlfriends this because she'd learnt the power and the driving force of sexual desire and satisfaction. And so she warns her friends not to begin a sexual relationship unless you're ready for it. Because a healthy and a safe and a secure sexual relationship will dominate your thinking. It will dominate you and your time. It'll dominate it in a good way. But if it's unhealthy, if it's unsafe, if it's insecure sexual activity outside of a covenant relationship, it will also dominate your thinking and your time, and it can even move to dominate and to destruct our very souls. There are 4 compass points I want to bring to us this morning. So if you imagine the compass with north, south, east, and west, this is just a little thing to hang this information on. These are guiding principles to help us to steward our sexuality. John and I were both youth leaders at a camp 25 years ago, and we had a guest speaker and actually a guest worship team. They were wonderful, and there was such a strong sense of the presence of God, and there literally was a thick fog over the top of this mountain. We really felt in God's presence. Well, you know what happened? Heaps of the young people started confessing stuff that had gone on in their lives, and it's not like that was the topic. It wasn't the topic we were speaking on, but just the safety and security of the presence of God opened people up, and they started confessing. And although John and I as youth leaders, we had tried to teach about this, we'd tried to teach some rules, all the external stuff, none of it had helped them, obviously. I think we had failed. And there was so much guilt and so much shame. That was a young people who had awakened and aroused love. That was 25 years ago, and there was a lot of shame and pain then. But today, the pressures are even greater. And in a technological age where at the touch of a screen, even accidentally, we can be exposed to sexual images. So here are 4 compass points, north, south, east, west, which we're going to hang our stewarding our sexuality in our search for intimacy. We all long for that intimacy. So the first one is the value of people, the value of a person. People are incredibly valuable. In fact, mankind was created on the last day of creation, and they are called the crown of creation. Psalm 8, 3-9, when I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you've set in place, what is man that you're mindful of him? The son of man that you care for him? You made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. Genesis 1:26-28. And then God said, let us make man in our own image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air and over the livestock and over all the earth and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. People are valuable because they have all been created by God in his image and crowned with his glory. People are incredibly precious. Every single person. I want you to look to the person next to you. If you're sitting by yourself, you might lean over or shuffle over. Look at the person next to you. I want you to say these things. Look at what do you see? What do you see there when you're looking at them? All right. I want you to say these words to the person next to you. Repeat them after me. You are a miracle. You are a mystery. You are a complete wonder. You are the crown of God's creation. And you have profound value and significance. Excellent, excellent. Very, very good. Well, sometimes we look at people, but we don't always see. See, a man is created in the image of God, and he is much more than a face or a physique. A woman is created in the image of God, and she is much more than a face or a figure. We need to look and see the person behind the skin. And when we do, it's actually possible to enjoy greater and greater intimacy in sex after years and years of marriage with the same person as we increasingly get to know, K-N-O-W, as we increasingly get to know someone. You see, sex is not just the bonding of bodies. Remember, it is the imprinting of personalities on soul and on spirit. And the word know, K-N-O-W, is used throughout Scripture in this way. Adam knew Eve and she conceived. The word know is used in place of the sexual union because it's so much more than the union of bodies, but it is the union of our spirits. Appreciating the incredible God-given value of people results in treating them with dignity, respect, and appreciation. And people are not to be used and abused, or just to satisfy our needs. You know, this principle alone could set most relationship problems on the road to healing. Just truly understanding the value of this person that you are with. Valuing people instills in us a desire to protect them from harm or danger. Valuing people creates a safe environment where people are guarded. We guard the valuable and we guard the vulnerable. This one principle of valuing people could actually solve the entire world's problems. That's a big statement. If every person considered every other person as sacred and as a creation of God, a whole lot of rubbish in this world would just be out. So that's our north of our compass, valuing people. The second one is that the cry for intimacy is universal. If we actually get this and understand this, Genesis 2:18, and the Lord said, it's not good for man to be alone. This is at the get-go. Nothing had gone wrong yet. And it's still not good for man to be alone. I'll make us help us suitable for him. The cry for intimacy is woven into the very fabric of creation and into our very being. And it will never go away. Sometimes we get hurt and we might back off and we might think, I don't need a relationship. But you know, the cry for intimacy that is in our very being will never go away because it is a gift of God. We all share a longing to be valued, to be accepted, and to belong. And from day one, Adam was looking for someone. No harm in looking, is there? Adam was looking for someone. Even in a perfect world, the cry of intimacy was heard. But if you add to this broken people in a broken world, then the cry of intimacy can become confused and it can become distorted. Our very makeup creates in us this universal hunger for intimacy. And broken hearts often will act unwisely in the search. in search for fulfillment of this intimacy. Sadly, intimacy has become the subject across the world, and we know so many stories of it on a big scale of exploitation and abuse, rejection. We have the greatest number of people as sex slaves today, more slaves alive today than there has been in all of history. Is that not something's gone wrong? Something's gone wrong with the cry for intimacy. Genesis 3 verse 7, as soon as Adam and Eve sinned, it says that the eyes of both of them were opened and they knew that they were naked, and so they sewed fig leaves together as coverings for themselves. As soon as their relationship with God was broken, shame suddenly enters in their relationship with one another, into their intimate relationship. Suddenly they're aware of a sense of vulnerability and inadequacy. And so they're covering themselves up. They were no longer safe to be transparent. Their sexuality was powerfully impacted by their broken relationship with God. Oh, there's a hint. I wonder what it would take to remove the shame, what it would take to restore the intimacy. A right relationship with God. You see, sin impacts sexuality in many ways, and they're listed on the screen for you. Sin in our sexuality causes us to devalue people. It causes domination, exploitation, selfishness, a negative drive for intimacy. I'll just get myself satisfied. Twisted motivations, manipulation, rejection, relationships. We expect our relationships to fulfill every need. Oh yes, I'll just get married, or I'll just have a boyfriend and all my problems will be gone. Because we're looking to someone to fulfill only what God himself can fulfill, and we end up disappointed or hurt. Oh, move on. Find someone else. Sin in our sexuality will strain the best relationships, because no human being can be a substitute for God. And we get driven by lust rather than by discerning the relationship that God would want us. I'll try this one, I'll try this one, I'll try this one, in this yearning to fill a hole. And it stops us being able to hear who God has chosen. And our deceived motives lead to bad decisions. So we can make many bad decisions in this whole area of our sexuality. I think everyone in the room could put their hand up if I asked it about bad decisions we've made. One of our biggest social problems at present is domestic violence. Half of all police call-outs are to private homes because of domestic violence. Relationships that were meant to satisfy the deep cry for intimacy in people's hearts have become so distorted and so destroying that people are actually harming one another. God wants, first of all, to heal our broken relationship with him through the forgiveness of sin, and not just sexual sin, all sin, to restore that broken relationship. And then he wants to heal us. He wants to heal us from the shame and the pain that sexual relationships we have sought in order to fill that need for that intimacy that only he can fill. And I've already mentioned next week, Pastor Jazz is going to speak the good news about redeeming our sexuality. Don't miss it. You need all 3 messages. If you missed last one, please get it on the podcast. God has created, the good news is God's created a reset button, and we get to start again. We get to start again through the completed work of Jesus Christ on the cross. We can go back and we can have a new start in our relationship even right now, whatever relationship we're in, or past relationships where there's shame and pain. We get to hit the reset button and we get to be healed. So we have the value of people, north, south. We have got the universal cry for intimacy. We need to understand that. Even when we're raising kids, our kids are going to grow up and they're going to have this cry for intimacy. I don't know that we've fully understood that or taught them how to steward that. The third one is God is a matchmaker. Did you know that? Do you believe that? The one who created in us the need for intimacy more than anyone else understands us. All too often, the search for intimacy is motivated by fear or FOMO. That is a new phrase that I have learned. FOMO, fear of missing out. So if I've got FOMO, I'll be on the hunt myself, searching for anything and everything because I'm afraid of missing out. You know the amazing thing? Adam slept while God removed a rib and created the perfect partner for him. Adam wasn't stressed or strung out or on a big search anymore. He could sleep. I wonder what God's doing while we sleep if we've lifted up things to him. There is a danger that we can destroy our lives by actions arising from fear that no one will love us. Anyone love me. And so maybe I settle for a whole lot less. How did Adam find Eve? God brought her to him. God is better than any internet dating site. And I'm not against internet dating, good, godly internet dating sites. I know there have been some great matchups, so I'm not against any of that. But we can trust that God knows who to bring to us. We don't have to conduct the search for intimacy alone. Like as if this is some part that's too embarrassing to talk to God about. God. I know that's what it was with John and I. I was all of 17, dear me, all of 17. And, oh, God, I really want a boyfriend. You know, that was praying the prayer, you know. And it was within about 3 weeks when John calls me. And on we go. How many? 34 years. It took him 3 weeks to build up the courage. So that means even the minute I prayed that prayer, that was amazing. God was already on the job. He cares about our lives. He cares about how our lives unfold. And he wishes to introduce us to people. But what he wants us to do is to prepare ourselves to be ready. Anticipating rather than searching. But how will I know when I meet the right one? How will we know? Well, the response of Adam when he meets Eve in his search is fascinating. He sees Eve and he goes, bone of my bones. It was like an inner witness from the Holy Spirit. He just knew that this was the one. God is a matchmaker and we can recognize his work like in any other area. We can recognize the inner witness of his Spirit within us. Excuse me, coughing. God's job is preparing the mate. Our job is preparing ourselves to be all that we can be, to be fit for the intimacy that's coming. Now, this involves character building and involves growing in how we have relationships. So it's good if there's opportunity to learn about these things or to talk to other couples, learn from their stories. Older couples in the church, tell the stories of how God brought you together and what God's done to keep you together. Those stories are really encouraging to the younger generation to see. Otherwise, how are they going to learn and know how God works? So, North was, tell me, valuing people. South is the universal cry for intimacy. Is that east or west? Doesn't matter. East is God is the matchmaker. And the last one, west, is that the sexual relationship is an act of covenant. And I'm going to unpack that for us. Just yesterday, my dad, Trevor, and Sonny were married, and it was a really happy day. I think there's a photo next one. Oh, it was the previous one. Okay. They stood before all of their children and all of their grandchildren and some friends as well, and they publicly made vows to one another to love, to honour, to cherish, and to be faithful to each other for the rest of their lives. An old term for marriage, which we don't hear so much, is holy matrimony. And it's actually a really good term because it captures the holiness of what God does when he unites two people in marriage. It's the spiritual component to marriage. Genesis 2:24, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Having sex doesn't make you married. Marriage is forged by a public acknowledgement of commitment and in the form of vows before God and before the people who are present and who are watching. People who are hearing, people who will hold you accountable, people who walk through some of the journey when things get difficult with you. I think we've actually lost a respect for marriage because we've lost the sacredness. You're right. Marriage isn't a piece of paper. It's not. A piece of paper is a reflection of the legal contract that the government recognizes. But what is marriage is this sacred moment when two people look into each other's eyes and they, before God, make promises. I will love you and I will keep you and I'll cherish you and I'll honor you till death do us part. When two people look each other in the eye and they make those vows before God and before one another, that's a holy moment. And the making of those vows is part of that sticking together. The physical act of sex afterwards is merely a reflection of what's gone on in the spirit, first of all. Just because our culture increasingly devalues the sanctity or the holiness of marriage doesn't mean God's changed his mind about who he is and the laws he's established in our creation. God's blessing, this is the cool stuff. This is what everyone should want. God's blessing, his protection and his provision are poured out on us in covenant relationships. Covenant relationship involves the commitment, involves the promise, involves the vow, not in casual relationships. God's vision for lasting marriage relationships is not just about our personal joy, not just about us being happy with someone, but God's lasting vision for covenant relationship is to establish families where there is a safe environment to raise the next generation. That's the vision, not something that's quickly pulled apart. And I know many people here have suffered the pain of broken relationships and broken marriages, so I do not talk about this lightly or insincerely or insensitively. But there is the decisions we make tomorrow. And we have to look at what God's good plan is so that we can continue in decisions for tomorrow, irregardless of the losses which he still can redeem as we move into the future. Those are the 4 points of the compass. And I can't talk about the topic of stewarding our sexuality without talking about the topic of temptation, which is very real. Here's a verse that we all need to memorize. Memorize and to practice. 1 Corinthians 10:13. Let's read that one together. Hey, as we read it aloud, it actually gets it in our spirits. Go. No temptation has seized you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, but when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. Jesus experienced every temptation that is common to man, so he knows the pressure. He totally gets what we go through, and he doesn't want us to fail. He has provided a way out to overcome temptation so that whenever we are tempted, there will be this window of escape. There will be this opportunity to escape that temptation if we look for it. But I want to look at this word temptation because this is new. 2 Hebrew words for temptation. Masa, which means to tempt, and bahan, which means to test, to prove, or to try. It's a metaphor for refining metal. It's only been since the 17th century that the word tempt or temptation included or came to be limited to test evil intent. Only the 17th century. Prior to that, the understanding of temptation is that temptation tests a person. It puts us to the test in areas of our character. Testing improves the quality of our character. How do we know what's in us unless we're ever tempted? We don't know what is in us unless it's tested. That's why I love the show MasterChef. where the home cooks go through a series of pressure tests. And they go from being a home cook to becoming a professional cook because they've been under the pressure of a test. Let's be clear. Temptation itself is not a sin. Having a random thought come in, a wicked thought even come in, a wondering or seeing something you weren't expecting, that is not sin. It's our response to it. It's what do we do with that thought, with that idea, with the word that was spoken, with the image that popped up in front of us, with the person. Excuse me, I can see I'm spitting everywhere. With the person, it's a spitty kind of topic. What do we do with the person who pops up in front of us? This happens. Temptation is not a sin. It's yielding or giving in to temptation that is the sin. So what are the benefits of this temptation? Or this testing? God tests us by putting us in situations that reveal the quality of our faith and devotion so that all can see what's in our hearts, but so that we can see what is in our hearts. 3 benefits of testing. Testing purifies our hearts like metal is purified in a refiner's crucible. Testing will strengthen our patience and it will mature us in our character. And testing actually leads to an enlarged assurance of faith. Oh, Jesus went through the testing in the desert. And then that prepared him for the ministry that he was about to begin. So when we go through a temptation, when we go through a testing, it is not set up for us to fail, but it is set up for us to overcome and to actually grow in character. So 2 responses. Let me give you Proverbs 4. This is another great one which we should memorize. Proverbs 4, 20 to 27. Here's the keys. This tells you what will help you in the moment of testing or when the temptation comes. My son, my daughter, pay attention to what I say. Listen closely to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them and health to a man's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Like, protect your heart. What do you put in your heart? Put away adversity, perversity from your mouth. Keep corrupt talk from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. So it's telling you what to do with your heart, what to do with your mouth, what to do with your eyes. Keep your eyes straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Make level paths for your feet and take only ways that are firm. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil. Man, that's the package, isn't it? I mean, that's like covering the whole body in how we can live. But it's in his words that we will find strength. I want to look, just to finalize, at 2 responses to temptation. We're going to look at the responses of 2 men who faced sexual temptation. Both men's hearts were hard after God. Both carried the blessing and the favor of God. Both had good reputations and good positions. Both men ruled a nation. One resisted the temptation, and the other one gave in to the temptation with serious consequences. What's the difference? 2 good men, hearts both after God. 3 key words in a simple equation are going to help us just look at what the difference was. And they're the words responsibility plus our relationship with God will equal resistance, being able to resist temptation. Responsibility plus relationship with God equals resistance. The first man, King David, a man after God's own heart. My goodness, he wrote so many of the Psalms. He was the greatest king of Israel. He defeated Goliath. He defeated the Philistines. He resisted harming King Saul, even though King Saul had tried to kill him numerous times. He was a good and he was a godly man. Let's look at responsibility in David's life in this incident. It said when kings go to war, David stayed at home, unoccupied, wandering around on the rooftop of his palace, and that's when the sexual temptation came to him in the form of seeing an unknown woman, we later find out her name's Bathsheba, bathing on another rooftop. David had sent other soldiers to fulfill his responsibility of fighting the war, while he stayed home with no responsibilities, nothing to occupy his mind or his heart. Secondly, David's relationship with God. I didn't realize this, but you know the Ark of the Covenant? So that's the gold box with the angels over the top, and it's got inside the 10 Commandments and Aaron's rod, the bread of the presence. The Ark would always be sent with the soldiers off to war. So the presence of God was with the soldiers in the midst of their camp. David didn't go with the soldiers. David stayed home in his palace where there was no worship and no intimate presence with God. The presence of God was with the soldiers. So there was now suddenly a distance in David in that moment in his relationship with God. David, now the third word is resistance. David sent 2 sets of messengers, first to find out who the woman was, and then the second time to go and get the woman to come and so that he could have sex with her. Now, there was a lot of time, I figured, to send 2 sets of messengers. One to find the name, and she turns out she's Uriah's wife. Uriah is one of David's own mighty men. You know the 30 mighty men? Uriah's one of them, not just the wife of anybody. I wonder, did he cease to see a person as being valuable? Ample time to think about this, to rethink it, to maybe do the resistance, but he didn't. And then once Bathsheba announces that she's pregnant, David not only arranges for Uriah to be in the front line and go close to the wall in the battle and be killed, but all the other soldiers alongside of Uriah were also killed. So he not only kills one to cover his tracks, to practice his deceit, but there are numerous soldiers that go down. So David adds deceit to his list of sins. At any point, David could have found the window of escape because God promises that there will be one. He could have confessed his sin at any point, and he could have resisted further temptation, but not fulfilling his responsibilities. Having distance in his relationship with God equaled pursuing temptation rather than resisting temptation. But God, in his grace, sends Nathan the prophet to hold David accountable. And David does confess his sin. And David repents. And David is restored back to full relationship with God once again. 2 men of equal standing, different responses. God comes to us when we fail a testing time. And he will give us another do-over, another make-up test to test if the character has grown yet. Joseph was the favored son of Jacob. He was the colorful coat wearer. He was a big dreamer, and he was an irritating brother. He was thrown into a pit. He was sold into slavery, and then he is thrown into prison. But he is destined to rule second in charge of all of Egypt. Here's the key words: responsibility. Joseph worked diligently wherever he was, and we read, whatever he touched prospered. Even in prison, Joseph's put in charge of the other prisoners. And Potiphar entrusts everything in his household to Joseph's care, and everything prospers in Joseph's household. Ultimately, Pharaoh entrusts a whole nation. So we can see, trusted in little, you end up trusted in much. Joseph is diligent with responsibility. Relationship, 3 times, and I'm not reading these passages because we don't have time today. 3 times in Genesis 39 it says, the Lord was with Joseph, and everything he did prospered. The Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph. Joseph's relationship with the Lord was close, and Joseph was in a nation where there was no temple to go and worship. There was no Ark of the Covenant yet. And yet, his relationship with God is close. The Lord was with Joseph. So we have very responsible, close relationship equals resistance. It says that Joseph was well built and handsome. And day after day, not just once did Potiphar's wife come on to Joseph. It says day after day she was tempting him, inviting him to her bed. It wasn't a one-off situation. But Joseph has to resist this lady's advances over and over. He has to resist until eventually he says, how could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Eventually it gets so bad he has to remove himself in order to keep resisting the temptation. And he runs away and his cloak is left clutched in this lady's hands. And it led to him going to prison. But you know what? God was preparing. He was testing Joseph, preparing him to rule a nation. So this temptation was a test, which was building fiber and strength into Joseph's character. Joseph knew and fulfilled his responsibilities. He remained in close relationship with God, and then he was able to resist sexual temptation. Could I ask the worship team up, please? Four points on our compass. The value of people. If we understand the incredible value and treasure of people, that's going to put a stop to a whole lot of things. The second one was there is a universal cry for intimacy. Let's understand it, that we need to feel valued, to belong, and to be accepted. God's the matchmaker. We can bring our need for intimacy to him. And he's not going to go, oh, no, we don't want you doing that stuff. I don't want you having intimacy. God's not going to say that because he gets it. He understands it. He's wired it into us. He wants another generation to be born. He wants us to be fulfilled. He wants us to feel loved and to belong, to feel accepted. And the fourth one is that sexual union in the safety of a covenant relationship. Weddings aren't as beautiful as they are. Weddings aren't white dresses. Weddings aren't big parties afterwards. Weddings aren't a string of bridesmaids and groomsmen. Weddings are not all of those things which our society has come to say what weddings are. You know what a wedding is? A wedding is two people looking each other in the eye and making a solemn vow before God to say, you're my number one. Oh, you're the one I yearn for. You're the one I long for. And I promise to love and to cherish you and to honor you till death do us part. That's covenant relationship. Oh, I want covenant relationship. Long for. I'm blessed. I'm enjoying covenant relationship. But I know that there are many who have had relationships and they've not worked. And maybe they're wired for that intimacy. I think, wouldn't it be nice to pray for each other for that? I think we just assume a lot. We just assume everyone's okay. We assume everyone's needs are being met because maybe they look all good on the surface. But I think we need to pray for relationships that already are and relationships that are yet to be. And how about we release the matchmaker? How about we release the spirit of the matchmaker in the house? I think that'd be really good too. I'm for that.